Hello, you're welcome. You're welcome onto my channel today, and it gives me great joy to observe you are viewing this video. I'm Professor Olayinka Akanle. I am a lecturer in the university. On this channel, I do a number of stuff, but all the stuff I do, sociology and research are very central to them. I do video on relationship and migration also. The video you are viewing today is within my playlist of sociology. Meanwhile, if you have not subscribed to this channel, kindly go ahead and click subscribe on your screen right now to subscribe to this channel so you might be alerted every time I drop new content. World system theory. World system theory is the title of the video you are viewing right now, but you must view my video on modernization theory, dependency theory, because this video is within my series on theories of development. So I'll drop a video on modernization theory. I'll drop a video on dependency theory. So, and these videos, they are in conversation somewhat. Then you might also have to view my video on systems theory. Then my video also on Marxism. This will allow you to put this video in proper context and proper perspective. World system theory, is synonymous or commonly attributed to Immanuel Wallerstein. Immanuel Wallerstein can be generally considered a sociologist, and try to explain the implication of relationship or interconnectedness of countries across the world, talking about geopolitical order and their implications for development of countries. So world system theory can be regarded as a framework or a theory that, that is used to analyze, the world as a single interconnected socio-economic system. A system in the sense they are talking about the world having different components and countries forming these components as groups. When you talk about a system, if you view my video on system theory, you will see that system means different parts interconnected and related, And so what system theory is looking at the world as a system of interconnected countries forming groups. Groups as core, semi-periphery, and periphery. So the world system theory grouped countries based on their development, existences, and positions and realities. Grouped different countries, into core, semi-periphery, and periphery countries. So core countries, according to world system theory, these are countries like the United States of America, the European Union, countries in the EU, or Canada, the France, Japan, Australia, all these countries that we consider as developed. I know, analytically speaking. Then periphery country, semi-periphery country, can refer to countries like India, Brazil, and China. We used to put South Africa there, but the current development reality of South Africa does not really allow us to put South Africa there because of the recent development realities of that country. But periphery country refers to countries of Africa, Latin America, and some part of Eastern Europe. These are countries that are considered poor or underdeveloped. Core countries are considered rich and developed. Semi-periphery countries are considered in between. They have characteristics of core countries in the core as developed countries and characteristics of countries in the periphery, in poor countries. So if you look at it, world system theory tries to look at the historical and ongoing relationship among these regions. Among countries in the region, the historical relationship talking about, colonialism. Countries in the core also include the United Kingdom, France and the rest of that. So looking at the history of the relationships among these countries, for example, looking at the history of colonialism, you also, and as that has also continued to today, it perpetuated to today. So, and you look at the world as hypothetically or analytically or theoretically considered to be organized hierarchically. Hierarchy of nations, hierarchy of regions, in the sense that you look at countries in the core as being at the highest level of the development hierarchy. Countries at the semi-periphery being at the middle of the global hierarchy, and countries at the periphery being at the lowest part of the hierarchy. The poor countries occupy the lowest part of the hierarchy, the periphery. The semi-periphery country occupy the middle level of the development hierarchy, and core countries occupy the highest level. And these core countries are considered very powerful, exploiting both the semi-periphery and the periphery for their own development objectives. And periphery country also, just staying in the middle, a little exploited by the core, but also the periphery countries, the poor countries are considered exploited by both the semi-periphery and the core. So, and this exploitation accounts for continuous underdevelopment of periphery country and continued development of the core countries and the semi-periphery countries. So this world system theory, has its root and foundation in Marxism and dependency theory. If you look at it very well, you'll be seeing some element of Marxism in this, talking about capitalism. World system theory wants to explain the history of capitalism and the consequences of capitalism and the process of capitalism. As exploitation is inherent in this geopolitical, relationship. So when you read my video on dependency theory, you will understand this world system theory more, that it has its roots in dependency theory, at the same time in Marxism. So also talking about the exploitation, core exploits the periphery for resources and labor. And if you look at this, we'll find that, during the Industrial Revolution and even colonialism, where resources are exploited, raw materials are exploited from core countries, and some semi-periphery, are exploited by the core countries from periphery country and semi-periphery country during colonialism. In fact, this is one of the major reasons for Industrial Revolution and colonialism, where the core countries had to move towards the periphery countries and semi-periphery countries to explore raw materials and even labor. And today, you can still find some semblance of this in terms of exploitation of raw materials and even labor in this, periphery country and semi-periphery country. So, core exploit periphery country for resources and labor, and this leads to underdevelopment. So, world system theory is a criticism of capitalism, which is based on exploitation of the semi-periphery and periphery country by the core. So the theory is best seen as a critique or criticism of capitalism. And core characteristics of this theory talks about the interconnectedness of countries on equal relationship that is exploitative. You talk about hierarchical structure, the core country being the wealthiest country, the most powerful country, and economically developed country, and the periphery country being the poorest countries, the powerless country, and economically underdeveloped countries. So the hierarchical structure is clearly demarcated along that line. Then the exploitation, history of exploitation and contemporary exploitation, and dependence of periphery countries on core countries and semi-periphery countries. And semi-periphery countries as dependence on core countries as the reason for their underdevelopment. And there's also the element of uneven development. The core countries, the semi-periphery countries, and core periphery countries are, they are unevenly developed. And you also look at it in terms of historical context of colonialism, and also contemporary context of imperialism or neocolonialism. So there's imperial neocolonial relations among these countries that continue to perpetuate the consequences of colonialism at that point in time, and as it continues to today. And this is very key for us to be able to demarcate. And capitalist world empire, the emergence of capitalism in the 16th century, or the ascendance of capitalism from 16th century to today as the reason for continuous perpetuation of exploitation and underdevelopment of the periphery by the core. Don't forget what Marx said. The history of all the society is the history of class struggle. So you can see some element of class struggle when you see countries of the periphery countries trying to wriggle themselves out of the stranglehold of the core. You can see this in the continuous, coming together of the BRICS nation, as a bloc against the perpetuation of imperialism and neocolonial, agenda of the core. You see the BRICS nation now say they want to form their own bloc so that they can challenge the economic exploitation and orthodoxy and oligarchy of the core. So this, you can see this as element of, class struggle, and you see the global inequality. The world system theory also want to explain the global inequality, what led to it, and how it's being perpetuated, and the role of capitalism in all of this. You now see here, want to explain the dynamics, the changes and the continuities and discontinuities in capitalist world order, capitalist world economy, for us to open our eyes to continue the continued perpetuation of the role of capitalism, the capitalist world order, and the consequences of this in terms of development and underdevelopment of nations. And how capitalism has transformed from the colonial era to the contemporary era. So, theories want to explain. So this theory want to explain from the Marxist perspective and the Pendistans, perspective. And you can also look at this from the angle of, geopolitical aspect of social change, how countries continue to change, society continues to change. But this change has been stable in a way that the core remains the core, the semi-periphery remains the semi-periphery, and the periphery has largely remained the same, if you like. And the role of global inequality, the international organizations that continue to perpetuate this, that are used as instruments. Look at the World Trade, World Trade Organization, United Nations, International Monetary Fund, the World Bank. These are supranational organizations that have these unequal power relations, power asymmetries that continue to drive unequal development and global inequality. And this supranational organization continue to be very prominent in driving the agenda of the core through aid time, loans and interest, and access to the global markets, and the power that the role of globalization also is very prominent, homogenizing the global society for the benefit of the core. The core as a center, epicenter, this nucleus of globalization, continuing to explore different nations based on the power asymmetry and international power relations that build inequality. So countries are unequally yoked together, and the powerful exploit the poor and the less powerful. But there are criticism against this theory, the world system theory. The major criticism is considered just like dependency theory, that is oversimplified. That the reason for poor countries being poor and remaining poor is more than the power asymmetry. It's more than just and the countries cannot just simply be divided into three. There are different elements, different characteristics, different parameters that make it impossible to just fuse all countries into three of core, semi-periphery, and periphery. So the world system theory is criticized for being oversimplified, oversimplifying the realities of development, causes of development, underdevelopment, processes of underdevelopment, and perpetuation of underdevelopment. Then there's also the argument of the agency of the poor countries themselves, that all countries have agency. What the semi-periphery country and periphery country have agency. They're not just exploited from external realm. What about their own role in subscribing to exploitation, and what is driving underdevelopment? Even from within them, they're not just being exploited, but we have to also give them agency, if you like. And also, there's also the argument that the theory is deterministic, saying if you unequally yoke, or if you depend, or if you relate, that development will be your consequence, will be the result if you are periphery country. So it's argued that the theory is deterministic, also, and not entirely different from Marxism, not entirely different from dependency theory, and that is deterministic. It has the problem of oversimplification and also taking agency away from nations. Fantastic. So if you look at this theory, the modernization theory, dependency theory, world system theory, you should be able to explain the reason for the development realities of nations and where they are coming from historically, their current situation, and where they might be headed. Fantastic. Click subscribe and share this video as widely as possible. Bye for now.